This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're talking with Jesse Herron about his haunted historical bed and brew, the Painted Lady. Jesse Herron is a tourism industry professional who previously co-founded the ABQ Trolley Co., which is expanded and rebranded as Tour ABQ. Welcome to the show, Jesse.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Icebreaker question. Y'all got any more of that Werewolves Got Nards Amber Ale?
Yeah, I'm going to come back for sure. That was probably the best one I brewed. I've heard from my other brewing friends.
Okay, it's the only reason I'm here.
Yeah, well, it's got the best name of any beer ever made. I mean, that's right from like my youth. You know, if you've seen the Monster Squad, that's like probably one of the most recognizable lines from that movie. You know, Wolfman's got nards. So.
Right. Many years ago, Newcastle perplexingly, wonderfully put out a special line of beer for Halloween called Werewolf Blood Red Ale. And it was so delicious and so wonderful. And now it is gone and it's just been like scrubbed from every shelf, completely discontinued. So you are carrying on a proud tradition.
Yeah, I mean, all of our beers, all the names come from lines of horror movies I grew up with in the 80s and 90s. So we're kind of Halloween year round. So it's, you know, great that you're here. It makes perfect sense.
Halloween in a can. I love it. So Jesse, what is a tourism industry professional?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Somebody who works in the tourism industry, I suppose. I met my business partner, Mike Silva, for the tour company back in 2003. We were both working for what is now called Visit Albuquerque, but back then it was the Albuquerque Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we both started out in tourism and hospitality. We worked there simultaneously for a couple of years and then went our separate ways and then kind of decided we were tired of working for the man and wanted to do our own thing. And we both had a love of Albuquerque and nobody was doing tours of the city and we knew there was a need for it. So we opened up ABQ Trolley Co. in 2009.
What were some of the hurdles involved in getting a trolley company off the ground?
Dealing with the Public Regulation Commission Transportation Division was the biggest obstacle. So just paperwork, that sort of stuff, finding insurance. It was interesting because we walked through Old Town about a year before we started and we were telling shopkeepers we're bringing a trolley tour to Old Town. And we were blown away by the number of merchants that thought it wouldn't work or they thought that they didn't want it because we were taking tourists out of Old Town. They don't want them to know that there's other things to see and do in the city. And it's like, well, we're taking them out and then we bring them right back, fired up to spend money throughout the cities. It was interesting, but we just turned 15 years old as a company this past May. So, you know, so far so good. And we've added a few things over the years. We added a ghost tour called Albuquerque Ghost Walk almost 10 years ago. And then a party bike called the Duke City Peddler that runs in Old Town as well. You might have seen it or another city. 10 people are pedaling. We have a driver. It's going from, you know, different bars and tap rooms and wine spots in Old Town throughout, and people get off and get a drink and come back on and pedal, and it's a good time.
So transpo, liquor licenses, there's no rocks you won't steer towards in terms of setting up a business.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think if I would have known the hurdles and all the things we had to overcome to do the business, we maybe would not have done it. So that kind of ignorance is bliss is rang true for us from the very beginning. Even with the Painted Lady, I mean, I had to go through 3 zone changes on the property, and that was not easy. There was opposition there from a few people that were scared of change in the neighborhood, and not cheap either, and not a simple process. You know, you're going in front of a panel of people basically in like a courtroom type setting, and you're telling them what a bed and brew is and why you should be able to brew beer at your property and how it's going to be good for the neighborhood. So it was, you know, those are the things that I'm really glad that those things are over. Those were not the fun days.
As a trolley company, you guys were mobile, agile, hostile. What made you want to put down roots?
I mean, I never thought I wanted to have like a bed and breakfast or a bed and brew or like a little inn. It just, we've been doing tours of the city for, I think 6 years or so, and things were good. And then I was living on the west side, just me and my dog, and we were way, way out on the west side. And I just felt disconnected from the culture and the history of the city and wanted to make a move closer to the Old Town area. And I was just driving through this neighborhood, Wells Park, and saw the this property and it had a for sale sign. Turns out it has this amazing like roadside history of being an old saloon and brothel, and you would not have known it. It could have very easily, if it wasn't me, somebody could have, bulldozed it and we would have lost this little piece of history. So it just was opportunity, and then dealing with tourists and kind of knowing how they think. And Billy the Kid allegedly stayed here, Pat Garrett. It's got ghosts, it's got buried treasure. It's like, what's not to like? I'm like, people are going to be into this. This is a cool spot we're saving.
Can you give me a little bit more of the download on the Painted Lady? Its long and storied history.
A lot of it's verbal history passed down from the family that began it, that started it back here, but I think it was 1881. They allegedly have written proof of Billy the Kid staying here, Pat Garrett also, and Billy the Kid died in July of 1881, and this place was built April 15th, I believe, from the documents I've seen, so it kind of checks out. But I think it originally started out just as a hotel or lodging establishment. And then in 1903, the American Lumber Company built the sawmill right across the street. And at that time in our city, you had, a ratio of like 10 guys to every single lady. So it was a blue collar workforce, mostly men. And I think that the people that ran this, just as a hotel, added on and turned it into a brothel. So you had a saloon with attached brothel. And when it opened, it was actually called the Swastika Saloon. And before everybody panics and freaks out, before Hitler came into power, the swastika was the official lost symbol of New Mexico, and we actually had the swastika on our road signs and flags and all throughout the state. Then Hitler comes into power, turns the symbol 45 degrees as the symbol for the Nazi party, and it kind of loses all meaning. But the swastika, if you do some research, most cultures have that symbol in their iconography, and it's a symbol for good luck and auspiciousness, and it's just sad that Hitler got a hold of it and ruined it. So, it's no wonder we couldn't call ourselves the Swastika Bed and Brew, but back then it was as commonplace as you hearing the word Sandia. Sandia this, Sandia that. It was swastika this, swastika that.
I know the swastika is a Buddhist symbol. Is it also a Pueblo pattern?
It is, yeah. So you see it throughout the Pueblos. The Chemo Theater downtown, built in 1927. It has that Pueblo Deco architecture. They refer to it as swirling logs when referring to the swastika, and you can see it inside the theater. Above the theater, it lights up when there's a show with the cow skulls that glow red. And on the outside of the theater, also on the front, you can see that swirling log iconography. There's also a federal building in downtown Albuquerque at Gold and 5th Street that has it as well in their tile work. So it's still, out throughout New Mexico, you can still find traces of it.
So at the time, prostitution was legal in New Mexico.
Yeah, it actually was. It was legal in Albuquerque, at least, from 1880 until 1914. And the city issued licenses for it, and it actually funded a lot of projects and brought in quite a bit of revenue. When I initially bought the property and I was going to neighborhood associations and I was telling them about the idea for the bed and brew, and some of the old timers came up to me afterwards and said, they remember walking past the bordello on their way to the grocery store to buy candy as little kids, which would put this way past 1914. So I think it was running kind of under the radar into the 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s even, which is crazy.
So once a brothel, always a brothel, or maybe not. You have a sign posted on your outside gate.
Yeah, the sign says, "This is not a brothel. There are no prostitutes at this address," which is funny. So it's tongue-in-cheek, so it serves a purpose in the sense that it's no longer a brothel. It gives a little nod to its historical roots, but also I get people who show up on occasion, because if you Google brothel plus Albuquerque, because it's in our history, it's the #1 listing and it's like right there. So I get these weird phone calls every once in a while of a guy being real weird on the phone. And then when it comes to, he's like, well, when do I get to choose the girls? And it's like, oh yeah, it's not one of those places. Or randomly on like the security cameras, I'll see like a guy. It's always a guy. Obviously, he's always in his mid-20s. Usually he's driving a Mustang and he pulls up in the driveway. And this is the next morning. It's like 9 a.m. I'm waking up and looking at the cameras and he's ringing the doorbell like 3 a.m. on like a Saturday, and I'm like, what the heck does he think he's doing? And it's like, oh, he Googled Albuquerque plus brothel, and so now there's signs there to say, hey, just this is, and it's worked. Nothing has happened since, so it's good. But yeah, kind of funny.
That's awesome. In what state was the property when you acquired it?
I refer to it as kind of like the neighborhood eyesore. There was a chain link fence around it. The weeds were spilling out onto the sidewalk. There was bars on the windows and doors. There was no landscaping. It was just dirt. It looked like a teardown. Honestly, it was not in great shape. So we went in. It was turned into a triplex at some point in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. And any semblance of the brothel or any historical significance was kind of buried. So they had shag carpet and a drop ceiling, and so we tore all that stuff out to bring it back to its brothely-ness roots. Thankfully, the shag carpet was protecting the floors, which had never been refinished, and there was blood stains and weird markings on them, and just kind of like a time capsule of things that happened there over the past 140 years. It was great. And then I'm a tall guy, and so we get rid of that 8-foot tall drop ceiling, and the ceilings are 11 feet high. And they're original, and they had the original paint color, and so it was amazing. It's just, this place was just hiding so many cool little things.
That's awesome.
But it was a dump, Jeff. Yeah, it was real rough. I remember buying it, and my mom came to look at it, and she was like, "What have you done?" Basically, and now she's like, "You did it. This is really cool." So
you took me through a little walkthrough, and it seems like there's a few final projects that you're polishing, but everything is basically done. How long did it take from the time you acquired it to now?
It's been 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just over 10. February of this year, 2024, was 10 years since I got the keys. The first year and a half, we got in right away and started renovating. So one of the rooms that I lived in, as in the owner's suite, was already renovated mostly. So that one was in good condition. And then it was the other two that were really bad, and we combined from a triplex to a fourplex, but found a contractor locally that specialized in Adobe, because it was all Adobe and there's walls caving in, and it's 140 years old. And it was supposed to take 6 weeks, and it ended up taking, a year and a half, and it went like way over budget, and it felt cursed. There were ghosts here. I was being attacked in my sleep by then. I mean, the first year and a half was really, really dark, really rough. And then just little by little, things got better. The energy on the property was getting better and changing. I bought the little casita, which used to be the bakery for the sawmill, from my neighbors 6 or 7 years ago, and made that a little event space. And that's where we are brewing our beer. And we share that space with a local nonprofit called Pink Warrior House. And so they're in there, and a nonprofit who support women who are battling breast cancer. So that feels amazing to have them and their energy on the property. And then things were looking really, really good. Early 2020, I was like, we're on track to do all these things. This is the year. And then shutdown happened, and it was 2 years of just doing decorating the trolley and redoing some of the rooms, because I wanted to stay busy and I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. We still had guests, nobody was staying more than one night because nobody was in town to travel or to do anything leisurely back then. It was just going from point A to point B. So it was just me cleaning the rooms. I was the housekeeper basically for the first 7.5 years. And so that was hard. And then doing the extra cleaning because of COVID, and I'd come out to happy hour where our guests get a free beer, and I'd be wearing gloves and a mask, and they'd be in masks, and I'd hand them a beer and say bye, and they go back to their room and drink it. It wasn't great times, but now most of those projects are done. We just got a sign out front a couple of months ago, and we had not had a sign ever. So now you can actually see it driving on 12th Street, and it's an amazing sign. And people now are coming in, so it's great.
It's not just dudes in Mustangs.
Yeah, no, they still show up. They can drink the beer at least, which is great, but I always give them a little side eye.
There is so much Old West and Prohibition history with the property. Why the emphasis on ghosts?
They go hand in hand with the Wild West, the history here. And I did a lot of research when I first bought the property, and you start looking in the newspaper archives, and now that you have a name, Swastika Saloon, all kinds of stuff popped up about knife fights and stabbings and about it being a roadhouse and all these things. So it was really cool. I mean, especially with all the TV shows with Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters and all of them, that helps out quite a bit. There's not as many people who are into the Old West history and they're visiting those locations. It's more like, oh, this is a ghost place, it's haunted, we can go and stay the night and try to have an experience. So I think it just lends itself to more people, and I'm just more interested in that as well.
Tell us a bit about the modern bed and brew experience here.
So yeah, we're like a room with the brew. So people come here to self check-in, and then every day from 5:05 to 6, we have what we call hoppy hour. So they come inside our little trolley car here, which we call the Ghost Light Saloon, and overnight guests get their first drinks free. And then now that we're brewing our own beer, we have a lot of locals that are now interested in having our beer and experiencing the property without staying the night. So now we've extended the hoppy hour to, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is just the 1 hour, the 5:05 to 6. Thursday and Sunday, it's 5:05 to 9, and Friday and Saturday, it's 5:05 to 10. So we open it up to the public. They can claim a free ticket on our website, or if you go to hoppyhour.beer, they're all right there, so we know to save you a seat. And then we've, opened that up even more by having these brews and booze events. It's really cool because you get people from all over the world that come here. We're talking beer, talking Albuquerque, and then you'll have locals here too who are hearing from these visitors. I think growing up here or living here for any amount of time, you get somewhat jaded, especially if you watch our local news. So you have these locals who are hearing from these visitors who are talking about they tried green chili for the first time and they loved Old Town and they did the trolley tour and they did the tram and they just are talking very pleasantly about our city. And I think locals are going, oh yeah, that's right. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Go to this brewery, try this restaurant, So it's really a cool sort of unique thing. And there's only room in here for like 15 people. So it's pretty intimate. So you're talking to almost everybody in here. It's been really, really cool opening it up to the locals.
Have you been surprised at how much interest there has been in your brews and booze events?
I don't know if I'm surprised. I'm very happy with it because I think our key is kind of owning the haunted and the ghosty paranormal stuff, and then combining that with events, like being basically spooky year round. And then that allows us to open up our beer garden, which we can get, almost 100 people in. And the trolley just kind of sits right here at the beer garden. There's a ton of events to hear a presentation about ghosts or what ghosts are, or to have an author come like Cody Polston, who's been here a bunch of times, who's written books on the subject, do presentations on it, do book signings. Our Fright Night open mic has been a hit. Everybody's got a ghost story, even the ones that are non-believers or on the fence, that don't believe in ghosts and they stand by it. They all say, because I talk to them every day in the trolley, because the ghost always comes up every day. And they always start out saying, I don't believe in ghosts, but this one time. And it's like, well, that's what that was, potentially. So everybody has a ghost story, even the ones that think they don't. Third Friday of each month, people show up. We had, I think, 50 this past Friday, trying to sign people up at the door if they want to speak, and there's not a single person. They're all here to listen. And then so Cody Polston, who co-hosts it with me, starts telling ghost stories, and I'll tell some ghost stories about this place. People get a beer or two in them, and then it's like, oh yeah, I got a story. No, I got a story. And then it's like we're running out of time, and we're racing to get these people's stories in. It's a free event. You share a ghost story or not. You listen. It's like going to the Moth or something, like a story slam type of thing. So it's just ghost stories. There's nobody doing poetry. There's no guitars. There's not even a microphone, because I don't want people to be scared about speaking in front of people. And so it's just project your voice, and there's 30, 40, 50 people who are listening, and they're very supportive, and people are in the mood to have a good scare.
So cool. I can't wait to attend. You also brew beer here. Who comes up with the horror themed beers?
That's me. So during the pandemic, things weren't really happening, and I had some downtime. So, the plan was always to start brewing beer. So I went to C&M and did their brewing program and did a certificate, and their brewing program was one of the top 3 in the entire country, and it was amazing. So you're learning to brew commercially, coming up with the names for the beers. I spent years going back and forth with friends and my brother and sister, who are both into the horror sort of stuff too, coming up with the names that were like ghosty or prostitute porter or blah 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 whatever. And you go to a brewery and they're all fairly the same. They're all very clever and very witty. And I was like, man, I want to do something different. So I was like, well, what if we just really embrace the whole horror and scary theme and name all the beers from lines from horror films? The first beer we ever brewed was a stout, and I took a line from one of my favorite movies of all time, An American Werewolf in London, and it was called The Undead Surround Us. And so when we put out the beer online, we have a whole description and the whole full quote from the movie, and we do our own custom graphics for it. And then after that, we did a hoppy red, And that one was called You've Got Red on You, which was a little bit on the nose, but that's from Shaun of the Dead, another one of my favorite movies. Right after that, we did a German-style beer with some German hops, and we used a line from Poltergeist, Go Into the Light, because it's Poltergeist is a German word, and it felt right. In the Wolfman's Got Nards. It's an amber, Wolfman's brown, so it kind of links back around, kind of, sort of. I just brewed a second version of a IPA yesterday, and it's called All the Damn Vampires, and it's the grandpa from the Lost Boys. You can't spell vampire without IPA, so it kind of makes sense too. We had a blonde from Scream that was Please Don't Kill Me, Mr. Ghostface, and that one sold out like in record time. So people come out and they dig it, especially if they're into that movie. They'll come and they'll drink that beer. Those movies from that era, like 80s, 90s, and a couple from the early 2000s were just like
Peak.
Amazing.
Absolute
amazing.
Peak.
Yeah.
We are recording on location inside the Ghostlight Saloon. It's a speakeasy. It's a spookeasy.
Oh, dude. I'm giving you credit for that one. That's
Oh,
real good. A Spookeasy. We're going to use that.
I wish I could use that, but I've attended to other spookeasies.
Well, I'm taking it from whoever did that. That sounds awesome.
Yes,
Spookeasy.
it is
That
freely
rad.
available. Can you tell us about how the Ghostlight Saloon came to be?
Yeah, so being one of the trolley guys for the past 15 years, people know you as such. And we, for the trolley company, ABQ Trolley Co., back in 2000-something, we did a Christmas event called the Pignon Express. It was like a play on Polar Express, and we took kids to the 2926 locomotive that was being restored. And Santa was there, and they came on the trolley in their pajamas, and we played the Polar Express. And they got to the locomotive, they got to meet Santa. We had Jack Frost there. We had Mrs. Claus. There was like Cocoa. There was Rude Boy cookies. And so the Santa that we hired that year called me a few years later, and he's like, hey, there's a guy who has one of the old city trolleys in his yard. You guys should buy it. And we weren't in the market for another trolley. And I was thinking if it was in his yard, it's been in his yard for 10 years. It's going to be yard art. It's not going to run. And then a few years later, I opened up this entire space here, and it reminded me of Santa telling me that trolley was there. So I called them up, drove out there, and they weren't using it for anything. The sun was just beating down on the wood panels on the outside, and the inside was used for storage. There was like beer kegs on it, and it was just like trashed. We towed it down here in 2018 as well, the day after we officially opened as Painted Lady Bed Brew. And then it took 5 years of getting the electric done and getting it retrofitted with being able to have draft beer in here and the heating and cooling and decorating. And we just opened it up last September as Ghostlight Saloon. I just wanted it to have its own name that was the vibe of the place. Ghostlight stuff is kind of interesting, especially with the theater people. It's been really cool so far.
It's curious that when you found it, there were already kegs inside.
Yeah, I have photos, and I was like, oh, so they were just like, and they're partying on it. I could just imagine they were just enjoying it.
This is a long time coming.
Yeah, and it's an actual Albuquerque trolley. So this is a 96 model. And I grew up here, and I remember riding these like in middle school and high school, and the city of Albuquerque sold them to different municipalities in the early 2000s, because when we started ABQ Trolley Co. in 2009, back in 2007, we started the process, and I called the city, and they never returned my call, but we learned later they sold all the trolleys to other places. So I believe it's the last one of its kind. It has the original city spelling on the outside of it, which has the extra R. So it's the original ALBURQUERQUE spelling, which throws people off. Albuquerque's had trolleys since the 1800s. So there's photos up in here. This is the Chemo Theater in the background. This is a State Fair parade, and that's a Budweiser float going down Route 66. So there's historic photos of old hotels in Albuquerque or old workers from the trolley line.
I could post photos because that's the only way people are going to get even an inkling of how cool it is inside.
It's a cool spot to drink a beer, for sure.
Yeah.
And even with like 5 people in here, you're like, oh, it's packed, you know? So we started something called Ghostlight Society. They get special pricing. They get discounts on lodging and merchandise and all the beer. We're going to do some quarterly socials for them so they can meet each other, because there's about 57 people in it right now, which is cool. And a lot of them are into the paranormal, and a lot of them have become friends and met. I wanted a place where that interest has a community. So if you're into that sort of stuff, or if you're an amateur ghost hunter, you've got a place to kind of come and talk about it. Or even if not, it's just a cool spot where it's not like going to a bar on a Friday or Saturday night and it's packed with people and you don't know who's going to be there. Like this one, it's like, you're going to go there and you can go by yourself and you're going to know somebody. So it's just like about fellowship. And I think we needed something like that. And then we'll do the events for the public, like the scary movie bingo and the fright night and stuff, and just kind of open it up on a bigger scale.
And this all goes to your philosophy about the importance of beer.
Yes. This whole place was kind of founded on the idea that beer brings people together. And people have been drinking this beverage for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it doesn't discriminate. And there's not the same pretension as other beverages. And it's blue collar, it's white collar, it's men, women. Everybody's welcome here. And there's kids in here during happy hour who are having a root beer, or they're just playing on their iPad. And it's just different. Things have changed, It's not like going to a bar 20, 30 years ago and it's a bunch of drunk men. It's cool that it's become more of a family-centered thing versus the evils of alcohol that we had 100 years ago. Prohibition took this place out. The saloon never reopened. It closed in 1919 when Prohibition hit, and then it later reopened as Charlie's Grocery, and it went from being a saloon with attached brothel to a grocery store with attached brothel, as you do.
I can see why, with the events you've had here, with the Pink Warrior House coming onto the property, I can see why the energy just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, like I said, the first year and a half, this place was cursed. Everything went bad. Even for the trolley company, we're doing tours, and there was one season where we blew out tires left and right. And I was like, this is because of me. This is I've got this bad negative energy. And I was being attacked in my sleep at night by these entities and we're having the property cleansed. But it really turned a corner kind of 2018. Pink Warrior House has been there since that time frame or so. The fact that when it was a brothel, it was a crib type of brothel, which is the worst type of brothel there was. This is not like Gunsmoke, Miss Kitty, good time vibes. It was the women lived here. They had dirt rooms. I was doing research years ago on brothels in the Wild West. And so this statistic is not for this one in particular, but it was for similar cities around the same time frame. But it wouldn't be uncommon for women working there to see 50 to 60 guys a day. So it went from a place where it was very difficult for women. I don't think any of them were in that business because they wanted to be, to now there are women who are coming here for treatment for their breast cancer, or they're coming here for counseling, or there's massage therapy, they're doing Reiki. And it's really changed the energy of the property, which is amazing. There's still ghosts, they're still here, but it's not a scary place.
You've definitely had some crews come through. What is it like working with the Paranormal-Industrial Complex?
Like the TV shows?
Yeah.
Well, I was always a fan, and Ghost Adventures was the big one. And when I bought this place, my little brother and sister were like, you need to call Ghost Adventures. And it's like, well, there's not a number. Yeah. There's not an email. There's not even you can't get to them. They have to find you somehow. Mm-hmm. So we had been on Psychic Kids, which is an A&E show, I think in 2017. And that kind of started out our little TV foray. And so after that, we were on a TV show on Travel Channel called Hotel Paranormal. And it was narrated by Dan Aykroyd. And that was really cool because they flew me out to Toronto where they film it. And they do a reenactment. They don't come here on site because it's too expensive. So they shot the Bed and Brew in Toronto, Canada. And it looked like it was like a row house. It looked like it was in Baltimore or something. And it was just it was crazy. But they hired an actor who looked like me kind of. And they're doing this reenactment.
Did you have to give him notes?
No, it was funny. It was
shadowing you?
It was ridiculous. It was awesome. It was a free vacation. It was really rad. I had one of the best beers of my life in Toronto. But so I'm watching it I don't have cable, so I'm at my mom's house watching on her living room TV. And I told all my friends, and the news did a story. So everybody's watching it. And the first part is a different story. And they split it. And the second half is Jesse and the Bed and Brew. They show me, and I was like, oh, I look good. And I was like, oh, that's the guy. That's the other guy. That's not me. And I wore a New Mexico, a Zia bolo tie for the interview on camera because I was repping.
Yeah.
And so they made me out to be this hipster guy, not knowing the bolo tie is the official neckwear of New Mexico. And so they made him, he's wearing the cheesy bolo in the episode, and just He looks like me, kind of, sort of. And I had like a fairly big beard at the time. And he's blonde and blue eyes. Then I started getting text messages and they were like, whoa, like that guy's ripped. And like, I was like, thanks. Awesome. Yeah. You know, so that was a good one though. That was fun. And then right after that aired, I remember thinking like, man, Travel Channel, Ghost Adventures is on Travel Channel. Somehow I was going to get on it. And then it did, but it wasn't because they like watched their own network. It was because the local news, Tessa Mentis on Channel 4, did a story on the Hotel Paranormal episode. And Zach Bagans, who's Ghost Adventures main guy and executive producer, has like a Google alert set up for haunted stuff. And so we read and saw that article, and I had a PA text me from Ghost Adventures and was like, do you want to be on Ghost Adventures? And I was like, let's do this. And then immediately COVID hit. And they came actually almost, it might have been this day exactly 4 years ago.
Okay.
And they filmed and they did reenactments and I got to play myself, which was cool. And I had some friends that got to be in it.
Was it intimidating after you'd seen your stunt double?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I was like, and in like COVID condition, you know, so not like doing a whole lot of stuff. But no, it was great. And not a lot of things had been happening ghost-wise on the property. So I was a little worried. But I knew they had never been to Albuquerque. And this place has such a cool story. And when they came, like things started kicking up like crazy. Like it was really, really a mess after they left, which through no fault of their own, I think it just kicks up activity. But that was a really great experience. It almost didn't happen. I had to like deal with, I wrote a letter to the governor, which luckily she didn't have to see it, but I had to pull some strings to be allowed to have filming done here. And we had to do it with COVID protocols and face masks, and it was great. It was a great experience. And then after that, there's a little local TV show called That's Some Scary Shit. I don't know if I can probably edit that out.
No, please do.
And they filmed here, and they had stuff was happening during that episode, and they premiered it at the Guild Cinema in Nob Hill just before Halloween a few years ago. So that was really cool to see. It's sold out show, and I'm watching me and stuff happen on the TV screen there. And then just recently, this past May, there's these two twin brothers out of Las Vegas, and they have a YouTube channel called Twin Paranormal. And they emailed me, and they have like 1 million subscribers on their YouTube channel, and they showed up here. They're in their late 20s. They have vampire teeth. They have tattooed faces. They look like rock stars. And these kids were the sweetest kids. I love them. They were so much fun. We were sitting in the trolley drinking beer before they started filming. And we were talking about like scary movies and, you know, sharing different vampire movies and all that sort of stuff. And they filmed here and that episode came out. And I think it almost has 700,000 views right now on YouTube. And it's free. So if you look up Twin Paranormal Painted Lady Bed Brew, you can watch that one in its entirety. And it's 80 minutes. I just watched it a few weeks ago because I hadn't. So I hate seeing myself on film or hearing myself. So it'll take me a while to even listen to this, Jeff. And it was entertaining. It was really, really, really entertaining. They do a really good job.
Awesome. Where can people find you online?
breakfastisoverrated.com or bedandbrew.com. If you want to go right to the event page, it's brewsandbooze.com.
And that's booze, BOOS.
Yep, you got it.
Jesse, thank you so much for having me out on the property, having me aboard the Ghostlight Saloon. This was awesome.
Yeah, man, this was awesome.
Please subscribe and follow. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.